In the unforgiving expanse of the Great Plains, where survival was a battle against both nature and rivals, two legendary tribes, Apache and Comanche, clashed in a centuries-long struggle that reshaped the destiny of an entire region. The conflict between the Apache and Comanche stands as one of the most enduring and brutal rivalries in Native American history. For centuries, these two tribes were locked in a struggle for survival, territory, and dominance. The Apache, with their semi-agrarian lifestyle and mastery of the southern Great Plains, had built a sustainable way of life that balanced agriculture with buffalo hunting. This duality allowed them to thrive in one of North America's most resource-rich regions. Yet, their success also painted a target on their backs, making them a focal point of interest for both rival tribes and European settlers. By the late 1500s, the Apache were firmly established as a dominant force in the region. Their villages, known as rancherias, were scattered across fertile lands where they cultivated crops and hunted the plentiful buffalo. This lifestyle not only provided them with a diversified diet, but also a stable foundation for their society. However, this relative stability was disrupted by the arrival of Spanish colonizers. Armed with horses, firearms, and a relentless desire to expand their empire, the Spanish brought with them an entirely new set of challenges for the native inhabitants. Among the tribes displaced by Spanish expansion were the Comanche. Pushed into the least desirable territories by more powerful groups, including the Apache, the Comanche were forced to adopt a life of desperation and adaptation. This marginalization fostered a culture of aggression and vengeance that would later become their defining characteristic. Though initially seen as unremarkable and weak, the Comanche's fortunes changed dramatically in the mid-1600s with the introduction of the horse. This development, brought about indirectly by their Apache adversaries, would transform the Comanche into one of the most formidable powers in Native American history. The rivalry between these tribes was born out of necessity, as both sought to secure their survival and maintain control over the resource-rich plains. The Apache, with their established presence and semi-settled lifestyle, saw the land as their rightful domain. In contrast, the Comanche, displaced and embittered, viewed the plains as an opportunity to reclaim their strength and power. This clash of interests set the stage for a conflict that would span centuries and redefine the histories of both tribes. The introduction of the horse to the Americas, courtesy of Spanish colonization, was a turning point for many Native American tribes. Among these, the Comanche embraced the horse with unmatched fervor. Unlike their contemporaries, who primarily used horses for transportation, the Comanche integrated them into every aspect of their society, from hunting to warfare. This transformation was so profound that it reshaped not only their way of life, but also the balance of power across the Great Plains. The Apache were among the first to harness the potential of the horse, initially acquiring them through raids on Spanish settlements. By the 1650s, the Apache had begun conducting mounted raids, leveraging the speed and mobility of horses to devastating effect. However, their use of horses was largely functional, aiding in travel and enhancing traditional tactics. In contrast, the Comanche took horse culture to an entirely new level. They became master breeders, establishing herds that provided them with a reliable and renewable source of power. This innovation gave them a significant edge over tribes that relied solely on raiding to acquire horses. The mobility afforded by horses allowed the Comanche to cover vast distances, previously thought impossible. As full nomads, they could traverse the Great Plains with ease, expanding their hunting and raiding territories to unprecedented levels. This mobility was particularly advantageous in buffalo hunting, as it enabled them to follow the herds wherever they roamed. The buffalo, central to the plains ecosystem, provided the Comanche with food, clothing, and tools, solidifying their dominance over the region. As warriors, the Comanches' mounted tactics made them nearly invincible. They perfected the art of firing arrows while riding at full gallop, a skill that left their enemies in awe and terror. Their ability to hang off the sides of their horses, using the animals as shields while shooting under their necks, further solidified their reputation as extraordinary horsemen. This combination of mobility, precision, and strategic innovation allowed the Comanche to outmaneuver and outfight nearly every adversary they encountered. This newfound power transformed the Comanche from outcasts into a dominant force. Their raids, conducted with precision and brutality, became legendary. They targeted settlements and rival tribes alike, striking swiftly and retreating before their enemies could mount a defense. The term Comanche moon was coined to describe the full moons under which they often launched their attacks, using the moonlight to illuminate their path. The Comanche's mastery of the horse made them not only the most mobile, but also the most feared tribe on the plain. The rise of the Comanche posed a direct threat to the Apache, forcing them to reevaluate their strategies and adapt to a rapidly changing landscape. While the Apache had initially been the dominant power in the southern Great Plains, the arrival of the Comanche as a horse-mounted force shifted the balance of power. The Apache, who had used horses primarily for transportation and occasional raids, found themselves outmatched by the Comanche's innovative and aggressive tactics. The Lipan Apache, Mescaleros, and Jicarilla bands were among the first to feel the full force of Comanche raids. These raids were characterized by their swiftness and brutality. Comanche warriors, mounted on fast and durable horses, would strike without warning, destroying villages, stealing livestock, and capturing women and children. These captives were often integrated into Comanche society or traded with other tribes and settlers. The psychological impact of these raids was immense, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty among the Apache. Despite these challenges, the Apache were not without their own strengths. They had a deep understanding of the terrain and were skilled in guerrilla warfare. Apache warriors used the rugged landscape of the mountains and deserts to their advantage, launching ambushes and setting traps for Comanche raiders. These tactics allowed them to inflict significant losses on their adversaries, but they were not enough to turn the tide of the conflict. The Comanche's superior mobility and resources ensured that the Apache were constantly on the defensive. The Apache's semi-agrarian lifestyle, which had once been a source of strength, became a liability. Their villages and farms were fixed targets, making them vulnerable to repeated attacks. In contrast, the Comanche's nomadic lifestyle allowed them to remain elusive and unpredictable. This fundamental difference in strategy and organization gave the Comanche a decisive edge in the protracted conflict. By the early 18th century, many Apache bands had been forced to abandon the plains altogether. Some retreated into the mountains, where they could better defend themselves, while others sought refuge in Spanish-controlled territory. This marked a significant turning point in the Apache-Comanche rivalry, as the Apache's influence in the region began to wane. However, their resilience and adaptability ensured that they would continue to resist, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The arrival of the Spanish in the southwest introduced a new dynamic to the Apache-Comanche conflict, fundamentally reshaping the trajectory of their rivalry. The Spanish, driven by colonial ambitions, sought to exert control over the region by subjugating its native inhabitants. Their initial encounters with the Apache were marked by attempts to convert them to Christianity, integrate them into the colonial labor system, and establish a network of missions to stabilize Spanish influence. However, the Apache's resistance to these efforts led to a series of violent encounters that undermined Spanish objectives. The Apache conducted frequent raids on Spanish settlements, disrupting trade, destroying infrastructure, and capturing valuable resources, including horses and firearms. These actions forced the Spanish to adopt a defensive posture, constructing fortified presidios to protect their missions and settlements. Despite these efforts, the Spanish were unable to fully suppress Apache resistance. This ongoing conflict created an unstable frontier that hindered Spanish expansion and exposed the limitations of their military and administrative reach. The emergence of the Comanche as a dominant force further complicated the Spanish's position. Initially, the Spanish viewed the Comanche as another adversary to be subdued, but as their power grew, the Comanche began to offer a strategic opportunity. Recognizing the potential to exploit intertribal rivalries, Spanish leaders initiated a series of negotiations aimed at forming an alliance with the Comanche. These efforts culminated in the late 18th century with the establishment of formal agreements that fundamentally altered the balance of power in the region. Under the leadership of figures such as Don Juan Bautista de Anza, the Spanish successfully brokered peace with the Comanche. This alliance was mutually beneficial. The Spanish gained a powerful ally capable of countering Apache resistance, while the Comanche secured access to Spanish trade goods, including firearms, metal tools, and other valuable commodities. These agreements also provided the Comanche with political legitimacy and an enhanced ability to consolidate their dominance over the plains. The Spanish-Comanche alliance had far-reaching consequences for the Apache. Joint military campaigns were launched to dismantle Apache networks, destroy their settlements, and drive them out of the plains. One of the most significant episodes occurred in 1790, when Spanish forces, supported by Comanche warriors, conducted a coordinated assault on the Lipan Apache near San Antonio. The battle resulted in heavy casualties for the Apache and marked the near-total displacement of their people from the region. This alliance also reflected broader shifts in the geopolitical landscape of the Southwest. While the Spanish sought to maintain their colonial authority, their reliance on Comanche support underscored the limitations of their power. The Comanche, in turn, used the partnership to further their own objectives, leveraging Spanish resources to expand their influence and secure their position as the dominant native group on the plains. The Spanish-Comanche partnership was not without its challenges. The cultural and political differences between the two groups occasionally led to tensions, and the Spanish's ability to maintain the alliance was contingent on their capacity to deliver on their promise. Nevertheless, the partnership proved to be one of the most significant factors in the decline of Apache power and the transformation of the Southwest during this period. In the broader context of Native American history, the Spanish role in the Apache-Comanche conflict highlights the complex interplay between colonial powers and indigenous groups. Rather than simply imposing their will, the Spanish were often forced to navigate a web of alliances, rivalries, and shifting power dynamics. This reality underscores the agency of native peoples in shaping the course of events and challenges simplistic narratives of colonial domination. Ultimately, the Spanish-Comanche alliance represents a pivotal chapter in the history of the Apache-Comanche conflict. It illustrates how external forces can influence intertribal relations and demonstrates the ways in which native groups adapted to and resisted the pressures of colonial expansion. By aligning with the Comanche, the Spanish not only reshaped the power dynamics of the Southwest, but also set the stage for the eventual decline of their own influence, as the alliances they forged revealed the limits of their control over the region. The combined pressures of Comanche raids and Spanish campaigns dealt a devastating blow to the Apache, transforming their society and reshaping the political landscape of the Great Plains and Southwest. By the late 18th century, the Apache, once formidable and resourceful masters of the plains, found themselves fragmented, displaced, and struggling to survive. This period marked the decline of the Apache's influence, as they were driven out of their traditional territories and forced to adapt to an increasingly hostile environment. One of the most striking consequences of the Comanche's rise was the near-complete displacement of Apache bands from the plains. The Lipan Apache, who had long been among the most prominent and influential groups in the region, were particularly hard hit. The combination of relentless Comanche raids and the Spanish Comanche military campaigns reduced the Lipan Apache to a fraction of their former strength. Their villages were systematically targeted, with crops destroyed, livestock stolen, and entire communities scattered. The psychological toll of these attacks was immense, as survivors faced the constant threat of annihilation and the loss of their cultural heritage. The Apache's semi-agrarian lifestyle, which had once provided stability and prosperity, became a significant liability in this new era of conflict. Unlike the Comanche, who thrived as nomadic horsemen, the Apache were tied to specific locations, making their settlements vulnerable to attack. The destruction of their agricultural infrastructure not only deprived them of food, but also undermined their social and economic structures. Without the ability to produce and store food, the Apache were forced to rely on raiding and scavenging to survive, further exacerbating their precarious situation. Despite these challenges, the Apache demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability. Those who were displaced from the plains sought refuge in the mountains and deserts, where the rugged terrain offered some measure of protection. These regions, while less hospitable than the plains, provided a natural fortress that allowed the Apache to regroup and resist. In these new environments, the Apache developed innovative strategies to sustain their communities, including forging alliances with other displaced tribes and adapting to the colonial systems imposed by the Spanish. In the mountains, the Apache's intimate knowledge of the terrain became one of their greatest assets. They used the natural features of the landscape to their advantage, establishing hidden camps and launching guerrilla-style attacks on their enemies. These tactics allowed them to evade capture and maintain a degree of autonomy, even as their numbers dwindled. The Apache's ability to adapt to their changing circumstances ensured their survival, albeit in a diminished form. The decline of the Apache also had profound cultural implications. The loss of traditional territories and the fragmentation of their society forced the Apache to reevaluate their cultural practices and adapt to new realities. Many Apache groups adopted elements of Spanish culture, including Christianity, as a means of navigating the colonial system. This process of cultural adaptation was not without controversy, as it often led to tensions within Apache communities. However, it also demonstrated the Apache's resilience and ability to preserve their identity in the face of overwhelming odds. The devastation of the Apache serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of intertribal conflict and colonial expansion. While the Apache were ultimately displaced from the plains, their story is one of survival and adaptation. Their ability to endure in the face of adversity is a testament to their resilience and determination, and their legacy continues to inspire future generations. The conflict between the Apache and Comanche, while devastating in its immediate impact, left behind a legacy of resilience, cultural survival, and historical lessons. Both tribes, despite their losses, adapted and endured in ways that continue to influence their descendants and broader discussions about Native American history. Their respective legacies reflect not just the struggles of survival, but also the enduring strength of cultural identity in the face of adversity. For the Apache, their displacement from the Great Plains marked the beginning of a new chapter in their history. Driven into the mountains and deserts, they redefined their strategies for survival. The rugged terrain provided a natural fortress that allowed them to evade their enemies and maintain a degree of autonomy. In these environments, the Apache developed a new way of life that was less reliant on agriculture and more attuned to the challenges of their surroundings. They became masters of guerrilla warfare, using their knowledge of the land to launch ambushes and raids that kept their adversaries at bay. This adaptation was not just a matter of survival, but also a testament to the Apache's resilience. Despite being displaced from their traditional lands and subjected to relentless pressure from both the Comanche and colonial powers, the Apache preserved their cultural heritage. They maintained their languages, traditions, and social structures, passing them down to future generations. This continuity of culture is a powerful reminder of their strength and determination. The Apache's resilience also extended to their interactions with colonial powers. While they were often portrayed as antagonists in Spanish, Mexican, and American records, the Apache were also skilled negotiators who used diplomacy to their advantage. They formed alliances, brokered treaties, and adapted to the changing political landscape in ways that ensured their survival. For example, some Apache groups adopted elements of Spanish culture, including Christianity, to navigate the colonial system and protect their community. These adaptations highlight the complexity of their resistance and the multifaceted strategies they employed to preserve their autonomy. The Comanche, meanwhile, left an indelible mark on the history of the Great Plain. Their rise to power, fueled by their mastery of the horse, transformed the region and reshaped the dynamics of Native American and colonial interactions. The Comanche's dominance was not just a product of their military prowess, but also their ability to adapt to new opportunities and challenges. They integrated horses into their culture in ways that revolutionized their mobility, economy, and warfare, setting them apart from other tribes. The legacy of the Comanche is also evident in their cultural innovation. Their ability to breed and manage large herds of horses made them one of the wealthiest and most influential tribes on the plains. This economic power allowed them to establish extensive trade networks that connected them with other native groups, as well as European and American traders. These networks were not just a source of material wealth, but also a means of influencing the broader geopolitical landscape. Despite their dominance, the Comanche faced their own challenges as the 19th century progressed. The arrival of American settlers and the expansion of the United States into the plains brought new conflicts and pressures. The Comanche's reliance on the buffalo, which was systematically hunted to near extinction by American settlers, undermined their economy and way of life. Additionally, the introduction of diseases, the loss of their land, and the imposition of reservations further eroded their power. However, like the Apache, the Comanche demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of these challenges. They adapted to the new realities imposed by American expansion, finding ways to preserve their culture and maintain their communities. Today, the Comanche Nation is a thriving community that continues to celebrate its heritage and share its history with the world. Their survival is a testament to their strength and determination. The broader legacy of the Apache-Comanche conflict is one of resilience and adaptation. Both tribes, despite the immense challenges they faced, found ways to endure and preserve their cultural identity. Their stories are a reminder of the complexities of Native American history and the importance of understanding the diverse experiences of indigenous people. The conflict also offers valuable lessons about the impacts of colonialism and the resilience of Native communities. It highlights the ways in which indigenous peoples adapted to and resisted the pressures of colonial expansion, using a combination of military strategy, diplomacy, and cultural preservation to navigate the challenges they face. These lessons are particularly relevant today, as Native communities continue to advocate for their rights, protect their lands, and celebrate their cultural heritage. In the modern era, both the Apache and Comanche have taken significant steps to reclaim their histories and assert their identity. Through cultural revitalization programs, language preservation efforts, and the sharing of their histories, they have ensured that their stories are not forgotten. These efforts are a testament to their enduring strength and a source of inspiration for future generations. The legacy of the Apache and Comanche is not just a story of conflict and survival, but also one of resilience, innovation, and cultural continuity. Their experiences remind us of the importance of understanding history in all its complexity and the need to honor the contributions and experiences of indigenous peoples. As we reflect on the lessons of the past, we can draw inspiration from the resilience of the Apache and Comanche, whose stories continue to shape our understanding of history and identity.